Introduction: The Architecture of the Storm. The disorder we witness today on the world stage is not a fortuitous accident, nor the whim of a cruel fate. It is, strictly speaking, the mathematical result of a civilization that has decided to erect its dwellings upon the shifting sands of the transitory, forgetting the firm rock of the eternal. What we call chaos is nothing more than the visible manifestation of an invisible collapse. It is the creaking of the master beams of a reality constructed without knowledge of the laws that sustain it. We live in times of fragility. Institutions that once promised security dissolve like mist before the sun. Moral and material certainties, which once seemed immutable, have turned liquid. The contemporary individual drifts, pushed by winds of confusion, perpetually reacting to the roar of external events, possessing no center of gravity of their own. They have become a dry leaf in a gale, ignorant that the force dragging them obeys principles that they could, if they had the will, understand and master. This treatise was not written to offer comfort to the fearful mind, nor to sell empty hopes that wither at the first contact with adversity. We are not here to deny the storm, but to dissect its architecture. Metaphysics, in its noblest and most ancient sense, is not a refuge to escape from tangible reality. It is the science of first causes. It is the study of the blueprint where the plans of the building are forged before the first brick is placed in the physical world. Whoever ignores these fundamental laws is condemned to live as an effect, a slave to circumstances they consider alien to their will. Whoever studies and integrates them reclaims their birthright, to become a cause. The prevailing confusion arises from an error of perception, believing that order must be imposed from the outside, believing it must be through decrees, forces, or material accumulations. However, the Hermetic law is severe and clear. The outside is always a reflection of the inside. If the world seems like a cacophony of conflicts, it is because the observer's mind has not been tuned. One cannot demand peace from history if one harbors war in thought. In the following pages, you will find no novelties, for the truth is ancient and requires no modern inventions. We shall proceed to remove the debris of ignorance to reveal the pillars that sustain existence. We shall speak of mind, of correspondence, of vibration, and of rhythm. Do not approach this knowledge seeking quick relief, but deep understanding. For only he who understands the architecture of the storm can remain impassive at its center, observing chaos not as a threat, but as the raw material with which, through his sovereign will, he is to forge his own destiny. Welcome to the study of the immutable. Chapter 1, the first principle, all is mind. The basis of reality. The fundamental axiom upon which the entire edifice of occult knowledge is built, and without which no true understanding is possible, reads as follows: The all is mind, the universe is mental. This sentence, carved into the porticos of ancient schools of wisdom, is not a poetic metaphor or a philosophical abstraction intended for academic debate. It is the literal, cold, and technical description of the nature of our existence. Before there was matter, there was intention. Before there was form, there was concept. Before chaos or order manifested on the visible plane, they existed as vibration in the invisible plane of thought. We live under the persistent illusion of solidity. Our senses, limited and deceptive, inform us of a world made of hard objects, of immovable obstacles, of stony circumstances that loom over us with the gravity of the inevitable. We touch stone and feel resistance. We observe the storm and feel its physical fury. However, metaphysics forces us to look behind the veil of appearance. It teaches us that what we call matter is nothing more than densified mind, energy that has slowed its vibration until becoming perceptible to touch and sight. Understanding this is the first step towards ceasing to be a creature of circumstances and beginning to be a creator of realities. If the universe is mental, then the key to modifying it does not reside in the brute force of one's arms or in the accumulation of physical riches, but in the transmutation of one's own consciousness. By the nature of the all. To navigate chaos, we must first define the ocean in which we sail. When Hermeticists speak of the all, they refer to that substantial reality that underlies all external manifestations, all appearances that we know under the terms universe, life, matter, or energy. It is the infinite spirit, unknowable and immutable. Do not imagine here an anthropomorphic deity, sitting on a celestial throne dictating arbitrary sentences. Such a conception is childish and limits the magnitude of the law. The All is infinite living mind. It is the matrix where worlds are gestated. We and everything we see exist within the mind of the All. We are, in a sense, thoughts within a supreme consciousness. Just as you can close your eyes and create a stage in your imagination, populate it with characters, and give them a story, the All has meditated the universe and in doing so has given it existence. The difference lies in potency and duration. While your imaginations are ephemeral and tenuous, the meditation of the All is of such intensity that for us it constitutes the most solid and lasting reality. This understanding leads us to a liberating paradox. We are real and at the same time we are not. We are real to ourselves and to others in this plane of existence. But in relation to absolute reality, we are mental projections. This should not cause discouragement, but power. If we are of a mental nature, then we are made of the same substance as the Creator, and we possess in a finite degree the same creative capacities as the infinite. We are not inert clay, we are vibrant thought. Tone, the architecture of reality. Let us now analyze how this principle descends into our daily experience and how it explains the disorder that your eyes perceive. Everything that man has created, from the humblest tool to the vastest empire, began as a thought. The chair in which you rest before being wood and fabric was an image in the mind of the craftsman. The war that ravages a region before being blood and fire was an idea of conflict, a desire for conquest, or a fear of scarcity in the mind of leaders and the masses. Thought is the cause, the physical world is the effect. There is no exception to this rule. The problem of modern man, and the root of his anguish, is that he has inverted this polarity. He has forgotten that he is the generator of experience and has come to believe that he is the passive recipient of it. He walks through the world reacting to reflections, trying to comb his image in the mirror instead of combing his own hair. When you observe economic chaos, social instability, or the fragility of human relationships, you are observing the end of a production chain that began in the invisible. You are seeing crystallized thoughts. External chaos is, invariably, the tangible manifestation of a collective, internal chaos. A disordered mind, governed by fear, greed, and confusion, will inevitably project a disordered, fearsome, and confusing world. And since most individuals have abdicated control of their own mental faculties, allowing them to be colonized by external noise, the global result is the turbulence that surrounds us today. 3. The workshop of the mind. Let us delve into the mechanism of your own psyche. Your mind is not a static vessel that fills with information. It is an active workshop that never closes its doors. It produces reality incessantly, whether you want it to or not. The law of mentalism establishes that thought is a force. It is not an ethereal shadow that passes without a trace. It is a subtle substance that seeks, by the law of affinity, to densify into material form. Every sustained thought, every emotion charged with intention, every rooted belief is a seed planted in the fertile soil of the universe. And the universe, in its implacable neutrality, will say yes to everything you plant. If you plant thoughts of lack, the mental universe will pull the necessary strings to confirm that lack in your physical reality. If you plant thoughts of victimhood, you will find executioners at every corner who justify your stance. It is not punishment, it is correspondence. It is the mind seeking its physical equivalent. In the current era, this workshop is under siege. Never before in history has there existed such sophisticated machinery dedicated to hijacking human attention. The screens that surround us, the incessant streams of news, the opinions of strangers poured like acid over our psyche, are not innocuous. They are outside architects trying to design the blueprints in your mental workshop. When you indiscriminately consume the fear that news programs sell, you are accepting a construction plan. You are allowing an idea of disaster to take root in your mind. And given that the universe is mental, if enough individuals accept that idea, the disaster will manifest with the precision of a clock. Chaos, therefore, is not something that happens to you. It is something in which you participate, often without knowing it, by lending your mind as a repeater of discordant frequencies. 5. The illusion of objectivity. You will ask, is the wall not hard even if I think it is soft? Does the economy not collapse regardless of my optimism? Here we must be precise so as not to fall into childish fantasy. The principle of mentalism does not suggest that you can alter the laws of physics or collective will with a simple snap of the fingers or a capricious thought. You live in a plane of shared reality, a collective mind where the beliefs of billions of souls have solidified certain rules and scenarios. Gravity exists because it is a mental law of the all, held with a firmness that infinitely surpasses your individual will. However, within that framework of immutable laws, your personal experience is entirely malleable. Two men can be in the same prison under the same physical conditions. For one, the cell is a tomb where his spirit dies. His mind projects despair, his body falls ill, and his time there is a hell. For the other, the cell is a monastery. His mind projects reflection, study, and temperance. Although the walls are identical, the objective reality, the life experience is diametrically opposite. In times of global chaos, this distinction is vital. You cannot perhaps stop the fall of an empire or avoid a market crisis with your thought alone. But you can, through the application of mental law, become immune to the devastating effects of those events. You can transmute danger into opportunity, fear into prudence. The world may be burning, but if your mind is a fortress of order, the fire will not burn your house. You will walk through the valley of the shadow, but you will not be touched by it, because your reality obeys an internal decree superior to the decree of the environment. Mental transmutation. The ancient alchemists spoke of transmuting lead into gold. The profane believed they referred to physical metals and went bankrupt searching for the philosopher's stone in furnaces and retorts. The initiates knew the truth. Lead was the dense, heavy, and fearful mind. Gold was the enlightened, sovereign, and solar mind. Alchemy is and always has been a mental operation. If the all is mind, then the only way to change any situation is to change the mental state that sustains it. This is called mental transmutation. The first step toward becoming an alchemist of your own life is dissociation. You must learn to separate yourself from the automatic flow of your thoughts. You must become the observer. Most human beings are slaves to their own minds. A thought of anger arises, and they become the anger. A thought of sadness appears, and they become the sadness. There is no distance between the thinker and the thought. They are swept away by the current. The hermeticist stands on the shore. He observes the thought but does not identify with it. He recognizes that the mind is a tool, an instrument that must be tuned and directed, not a master to be obeyed. When external chaos knocks at your door, the automatic reaction of your conditioned mind will be fear or anxiety. The alchemist observes that reaction and says, "This is a mental state, a low vibration. I have the power to change the vibration." And through an act of will, he applies the opposite pole. This is not denial of reality. It is the affirmation of a higher reality. It is the recognition that your internal state is the cause, and the external circumstance is only the delayed effect. If you maintain internal order, the external chaos will eventually reorganize to reflect that order. It is a law, it does not fail. Fight radical responsibility. Accepting the first principle carries a heavy burden, one that few are willing to bear. Radical responsibility. If the universe is mental, excuses no longer exist. There are no longer guilty parties out there. Your boss, your partner, the government, the economy, the weather, all are secondary actors in the play. It is tempting and socially accepted to declare oneself a victim of the times. It is comfortable to say that one does not prosper because the system is unfair, or that one has no peace because the world is noisy. But metaphysics is a science for adults, not for children seeking comfort. If your life is a chaos, it is because your mind is a chaos. If your relationships are a war, it is because there is a military conflict within you. If you feel that you lack everything, it is because you hold a mental image of poverty. This truth is bitter at first, like a potent medicine. But once swallowed, it becomes the elixir of freedom. Because if you are the cause of your own misfortune, then, and only then, you have the absolute power to be the cause of your own glory. No one can save you from your own mind. No inherited fortune or stroke of luck will change your reality if you keep operating with discord. However, The practice of silence and focus. To apply the principle that all is mind in the middle of the current maelstrom, discipline is required. The mind, left to its own devices, is like an abandoned garden. The weeds of negative thought grow faster than the flowers of deliberate intention. You must become the implacable gardener of your mental space. You must mount guard at the gates of your perception. Every time you allow a sensationalist news story to steal your calm, you have let a vandal into your temple. Every time you involve yourself in a sterile discussion in the digital public squares, you are wasting your mental substance. Every time you mechanically repeat the complaints of the masses, you are reinforcing the bars of your own prison. The practice is focus. In a mental universe, attention is the most valuable currency. That to which you pay attention grows. That from which you withdraw your attention withers and dies. If you want to get out of chaos, stop feeding it with your mind. Withdraw your attention from the catastrophe and place it with the firmness of a laser beam on the order you wish to build. Do not ignore practical facts, but do not give them your soul. Act in the physical world, but keep your mind anchored in the vision. Chapter 2. The Law of Correspondence in Times of Noise. As within, so without. There is a truth that precedes written history, a principle engraved on the emerald tablet that has survived the fall of empires and the forgetting of eras. This second great hermetic principle contains the key to deciphering the enigma of your own existence and that of the cosmos you inhabit. It reads with deceptive simplicity, as above so below, as below so above, and for the purposes of our instruction in this plane of density and conflict, we will translate it to its most immediate and brutal application, as within, so without. This axiom is not a moral suggestion or a poetic metaphor. It is a mechanical law, as inescapable as gravity. It establishes that there is a harmony, a concordance, and a constant correspondence between the various planes of manifestation, life, and being. Nothing is disconnected. The atom obeys the same geometry as the solar system. Man obeys the same dynamics as the universe. But what summons us here is not astronomy, but spiritual survival in times of turbulence. The law of correspondence is the implacable mirror that the universe holds in front of your face every morning. We live in an era characterized by noise. I'm not referring only to the acoustic roar of cities, but to the informational cacophony, the saturation of stimuli, the fury of conflicting opinions, and the dizzying acceleration of events. Modern man looks out the window and sees a fragmented, hostile world, lacking direction and purpose. He sees corruption in the high spheres, violence in the low ones, and a devouring anxiety in the middle. And before this spectacle, his instinctive reaction is to blame the window. The fundamental error, the great tragedy of contemporary consciousness, is to believe that chaos is out there. The individual perceives themselves as a separate entity, an island of order or good intentions. Besieged by an ocean of someone else's madness, they shout against injustices, lament the economy, fear plagues, and despise their rulers, convinced that if only the world changed, they would find peace. And the law of correspondence destroys that illusion with the force of a hammer hitting glass. It tells you without mercy, what you see outside is what you are inside. The world is not a window, it is a mirror. And no one has ever managed to comb the image reflected in the mirror by trying to comb the glass. To change the reflection, one must comb the subject, the mechanism of the universal mirror. To understand why your life has the form it has, you must stop analyzing events and begin to analyze the observer of the events. Objective reality, that neutral raw material of which we spoke in the first chapter, lacks emotional quality until it passes through the filter of your own internal correspondence. The universe, in its infinite intelligence, does not waste energy. It does not create random scenarios for your entertainment. It creates scenarios that vibratory correspond to the frequency that you emit. If you harbor fear, the universe will not send you security. By law of correspondence, it will send you circumstances. It will send you circumstances that justify and amplify that fear. If you harbor repressed anger, you will find tyrants and offenders at every corner, not because of bad luck, but because your within is calling to your without. Imagine yourself as a movie projector. The film is in your mind. The film consists of thoughts, beliefs, emotions, and unresolved traumas. The screen is the physical world. If the film is a horror movie, it is useless to run toward the screen and try to tear the fabric to stop the monster. The monster does not live on the screen, it lives on the film roll. Until you change the roll, the projection will repeat eternally, even if you change theaters, change cities, partners, or jobs. In these times of noise, correspondence is swift. Formerly, the time between the internal sowing and the external harvest was long. Today, the density of human experience has accelerated the process. The collective anguish you feel in the air is nothing more than the sum of millions of individual anguishes projected simultaneously. The world is sick because the human soul is sick. The anatomy of external chaos. Let us analyze the pillars of modern chaos under the light of this law. Observe the economy. See the volatility, the scarcity, the unfair competition, the fear of poverty that paralyzes the masses. What is this but the macrocosmic projection of a microcosmic consciousness of lack? The man who believes in the depths of his being that he is not enough, that resources are limited, and that he must snatch to possess, collectively creates a rapacious and fragile economic system. External poverty is the shadow of internal spiritual poverty. Solid wealth cannot be built on foundations of fear. He who is rich in spirit, who understands his own generative capacity, rarely experiences prolonged misery, for his within overflows with possibility, and his without organizes itself to correspond to that abundance. Observe human relationships. Mistrust, superficiality, the rapid breakdown of bonds. Is this not an exact reflection of man's relationship with himself? He who does not know himself, who does not respect himself, and who lies to himself, will inevitably attract relationships based on lies, lack of respect, and ignorance. The tyrant who oppresses you in your workplace is the materialization of your own lack of sovereignty. He exists to show you where you have abdicated your power. The traitor who hurts you is the reflection of your own internal betrayals, of the times you have failed your own word or ignored your intuition. Observe politics and leadership. The masses complain about corrupt, blind, and selfish leaders. But have those leaders not come out of the same people? Under the law of correspondence, a sleeping, selfish, and morally lax people cannot manifest by mere spiritual mathematics an awake, altruistic, and upright government. The ruler is the symptom, not the disease. He is the visible embodiment of the collective shadow. 3. Noise as correspondence of the absent silence. The most distinctive feature of our era is distraction. Screens that glow perpetually, sounds that never cease, an infinite demand for our attention. We call this progress or connection, but metaphysically it is noise. Why have we created such a noisy world? Why has humanity filled every second of silence with artificial stimuli? Because internal silence has become unbearable. As within, so without. Modern man flees from his own emptiness. He is afraid to be alone with his thoughts, because in doing so he would face his demons, his spiritual debts, and his lack of purpose. To not hear the cry of his own soul, he has built a civilization that shouts louder. The chaos of information, the saturation of useless data, corresponds to a mind that has lost the capacity to discern and focus. We have a fragmented world because we have fragmented minds. Attention has been broken into 1,000 pieces, and therefore our societies break into 1,000 tribes. If you desire peace in your environment, you will not find it by searching for a geographic place where there is no noise. If your mind is a whirlwind, you will carry the storm to the most silent desert. External peace is a privilege reserved exclusively for those who have conquered internal peace. When the interior is silenced and ordered, the exterior loses its capacity to disturb. The noise is still there, but it no longer penetrates. It becomes an irrelevant backdrop before the symphony of internal order. The victimhood trap. The acceptance of the law of correspondence is the death of victimhood, and this is why it is such an unpopular law. The ego loves being a victim. The victim is innocent. The victim has an excuse. The victim receives sympathy. Saying, "My life is a mess because my parents didn't love me," is a sweet narcotic. It exempts us from the titanic task of self-transformation, but the metaphysician, the seeker of truth, spits out that poison. He knows that declaring himself a victim is declaring himself an effect, and he has come to be a cause. If you accept that, as within, so without, then you must accept total responsibility. This is terrifying, but it is the only door toward freedom. It means no one has the power to make you unhappy without your vibratory consent. It means no external crisis can destroy you if it does not find a resonance of destruction within you. When you stop blaming the mirror for your tired face, you regain the power to rest. Inertia and delay time. A common objection arises in the student's mind. I have changed my thought. I have sought internal order, and yet my world is still a chaos. Does the law fail? The law never fails. What fails is patience and the understanding of the element of time. There is a phenomenon known as inertia or delay time. On the mental plane, changes are instantaneous. On the physical plane, matter is dense and slow. Imagine a large ship sailing at full speed. If the captain turns the rudder, changes the within, the ship does not change direction immediately. For a time, it will continue moving in the old direction due to previous momentum. Your current reality is the materialization of your thoughts and internal states from months or years ago. It is awake. If you change your within today, you will not see the new without tomorrow at dawn. For a time, you will continue living in the rubble of your old self. The test of the initiate is to maintain the new internal order, even though the exterior still shows chaos. Most men, not seeing immediate results, become discouraged and return to their old disorder, thus confirming that this doesn't work. The wise man persists. He knows that matter, though slow, is obedient. If he holds the vibration of order, prosperity, and internal peace with enough intensity and duration, the physical world heavily will begin to turn until it aligns with the new course. Vice, the hygiene of the soul. To apply the law of correspondence in times of noise, one must practice a rigorous hygiene of the inner world. In the same way that you would not allow strangers to enter your house to throw garbage in your living room, you must not allow the impressions of the chaotic world to enter without a filter. You must not let them enter your subconscious mind. What you consume, you become, and what you become, your world becomes. If you feed on images of violence, hate speech, and prophecies of apocalypse, you are ingesting poison. That poison will sicken your within, and by law your without will become toxic. The practice consists of becoming a jealous guardian of the gates of the senses. You must learn to look without seeing, to listen without hearing. You must be able to walk through the public square and observe the chaos as one observes a storm behind thick glass, recognizing its existence but without getting wet in it. You must deliberately cultivate the correspondences you wish to see manifested. Do you desire loyalty? Be implacably loyal to your principles. Do you desire love? Eliminate all hate and judgment from your heart. Do you desire abundance? Eradicate envy and the fear of loss, and cultivate generosity and gratitude. Do you desire social order? Be an impeccable citizen. Order your papers, your house, your word. Do not wait for the world to take the first step. The world is a reflection. The reflection has no initiative of its own. It only imitates. You are the original. You must smile first so the mirror smiles back. Zephin, unassailable sovereignty. The ultimate goal of understanding this law is to reach a state of unassailable sovereignty. It is to reach the point where the within is so strong, so radiant, and so ordered that it begins to impose itself upon the without instead of being modified by it. The great masters, the leaders who have changed history, operated from this level. They did not adapt to reality. They forced reality to adapt to their internal vision. Their faith, their internal state of certainty, was more solid than the facts, the temporary external state. In the middle of current chaos, you have the opportunity to be a pillar. When everyone around you loses their head, dragged by the panic that corresponds to their internal vacuum, you can remain upright. Not out of arrogance, but out of physics. If your frequency does not correspond to panic, it will pass through you. It will pass through you without touching you, like a radio wave that finds no receiver. You will become an agent of transmutation, Upon entering a room full of discord, your mere presence, charged with an unmovable internal order, will begin to pacify the environment. Correspondence works in both directions. Chaos can infect you if you are weak, but your order can heal the chaos if you are strong. This is true magic, not moving objects with the mind, but moving circumstances with character. Fair feet, the microcosm and the macrocosm. Reflect on the immensity of this law. As above, so below. The atom is a solar system in miniature. Man is a universe in compendium. If you manage to put order in your small personal universe, your body, your emotions, your thoughts, you are contributing to the order of the great universe. You are contributing in the most effective way possible. We are told that we must save the world. It is an absurd pretension if the one who tries cannot even save themselves from their own morning bad mood. The world does not need more noisy activists who project their unresolved anger onto social causes. The world needs ordered beings. It needs individuals who have signed a peace treaty with their own existence. Because when a man orders himself, his family benefits. When families order themselves, cities prosper. When cities prosper, nations find peace. Everything begins in the cell. Everything begins within. Chapter 3. Navigating Polarity, the Art of Transmutation. Handling emotional and social extremes. The third great Hermetic principle contains a truth that at first glance seems to contradict ordinary experience, but which, once understood, grants the student the staff of command over their own internal storms. The axiom reads, everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites, like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. We live in a world of duality. Light and darkness, heat and cold, love and hate, good and evil. The untrained mind perceives these concepts as separate entities, irreconcilable and in eternal war. The common man believes that courage is one thing and fear is another entirely, and that to obtain courage he must annihilate fear. He believes that peace is the absence of war, and that love is the antithesis of hate. Metaphysics, however, reveals a more subtle underlying structure. It teaches us that opposites are not enemies, but extremes of the same rod. The difference is not of kind, but of vibratory degree. In times of social chaos and emotional turbulence, the understanding of polarity is the only refuge against collective madness. Today's society fractures into tribes that hate each other, each clinging to one pole, shouting its partial truth as if it were the absolute truth. The individual, dragged by these currents, oscillates like a pendulum between euphoria and depression, between fanatical rage and total apathy. The art of mental transmutation consists of learning to slide voluntarily along this infinite scale instead of being dragged by it. The master does not seek to destroy darkness, for he knows that darkness has no existence of its own. He simply raises the vibration until darkness becomes light. He does not fight against hate. He slides his perception toward love, knowing that both are the same emotional energy polarized at different frequencies. The alchemy of degrees. To illustrate this principle, let us observe the thermometer. Where does heat end and cold begin? There is no absolute line in the instrument that marks such a division. Heat and cold are mere words we use to designate degrees of the same thing. Temperature. Cold is not a positive entity. It is simply the absence of heat, or more precisely, a lower thermal vibration. Let us apply this to the mental and emotional plane. Love and hate are not two distinct emotions. They are the same passion, the same energetic intensity. Hate is love at a low, dense and contractive vibration. Love is hate elevated, expanded and purified. That is why it is so easy to pass from passionate love to visceral hate in an instant. The distance between them is short because they inhabit the same scale. It would be impossible to transmute hate into mathematical indifference, for they belong to different scales, but it is entirely possible to transmute hate into love or fear into courage. Fear and courage are the same energy. Fear is frozen, paralyzed vital energy, turned inward in self-protection. Courage is that same vital energy released, flowing outward in action. The coward and the hero feel the same discharge in the stomach. The difference lies in how they polarize that sensation. Modern chaos feeds on the ignorance of this principle. We are taught to fight against fear, against poverty, against the political enemy. But struggle reinforces the unwanted pole. By concentrating on the negative extreme, one grants it energy and reality. The mental alchemist does not fight, he transmutes. If he desires heat, he does not attack the cold, he lights a fire. If he desires virtue, he does not punish vice, he cultivates the opposite virtue. Tersuder, the trap of social polarization. Never before has humanity been so polarized. Society has become a battlefield of extreme opinions. The individual is demanded to choose a side, left or right, believer or atheist, victim or executioner. He is told that if he is not at one pole, he is against the truth. This is the trap of lower duality. When you blindly identify with one extreme, you become a slave to that pole and, paradoxically, you bind yourself to the opposite pole. He who hates his political enemies is as obsessed and controlled by them as if he were their lover. His mind vibrates in unison with that which he despises. Extremes meet. The religious fanatic and the militant atheist share the same mental structure of intolerance. Only the content of their dogma changes, but the degree of rigidity is identical. The law of polarity warns us that any truth taken to its extreme becomes error. Absolute freedom without restriction becomes anarchy and the tyranny of the strongest. Absolute order without freedom becomes dictatorship and the death of the spirit. Wisdom resides in balance, in the ability to see that the truth of the other side is a partial truth that complements one's own. In times of chaos, the social pressure to polarize is immense. The group demands loyalty to the dogma. The alchemist, however, must resist the gravity of the mass. He must be able to observe the two poles without being absorbed by either. This does not mean indecision or lukewarmness. It means that his position is chosen consciously, not imposed by reaction to the opposite. The danger of unconscious polarization is that it turns us into human pendulums. Today we worship a leader, tomorrow we lynch him. Today we are euphoric over one piece of news, tomorrow devastated by another. We live at the mercy of external currents because we have surrendered control of our own vibratory dial. Third, the art of polarizing oneself. How is sovereignty reclaimed in a world of extremes? Through the deliberate practice of self-polarization. You possess a will. That will is the transmuting agent. When you feel yourself falling toward the pole of sadness, depression, or discouragement, do not give in to inertia. Do not judge yourself for feeling it either, for it is natural to oscillate. Instead, recognize your position on the scale and apply your will to slide, degree by degree, toward the opposite pole. Do not try to jump from the abyss of depression to the peak of ecstasy in a second. The tension would break your mind. Look for the next higher degree, from depression to calm, from calm to interest, from interest to enthusiasm. If you feel fear in the face of economic or social uncertainty, do not try to suppress the fear. Repressed fear sinks into the subconscious and turns into panic. Transmute it. Take that nervous energy that makes you tremble and use it to sharpen your attention, to plan, to act with prudence. Convert the low vibration, paralysis, into high vibration, focused action. The key is attention. Where you put your attention, there you polarize. If your attention is fixed on news of catastrophe, you are polarizing toward fear. If you withdraw your attention from the screen and put it on your work, your family, or your study, you automatically begin to raise your vibration. The Hermetic Master is he who, in the midst of an enraged crowd, can polarize toward peace. He is not insensitive. He feels the dense vibration of the environment, but he refuses to resonate with it. He keeps his own musical note sounding loud and clear, preventing the dissonant noise from detuning his instrument, thus neutralizing external conflict. The application of this law in interpersonal relationships is of supreme efficacy. We often find ourselves before people polarized in anger, resentment, or irrationality. The instinctive reaction of the neophyte is to respond in kind, shout for shout, insult for insult. But the law teaches that two identical poles repel and exacerbate conflict. If you respond to hate with hate, you are feeding the bonfire. You are validating the low vibration. The alchemist applies the opposite pole. To the anger of the other, he responds with unshakable calm. To the fear of the other, he responds with security. To hate, with courtesy or benevolence. This is not submission. It is superior mental physics. Higher and subtler vibrations have dominion over lower and denser ones. Light always dispels darkness. Darkness can never dispel light. If you maintain your positive polarity with sufficient firmness, the other person will be forced, by the law of induction, to raise their vibration to meet you, or else to withdraw, because the dissonance is unbearable to them. Remember, water puts out fire. Do not try to put out fire with fire. In the chaos of current social discussions, where everyone wants to be right, the real power lies with the one who does not need to prove anything, the one who remains in his center, radiating a vibration of understanding that disarms the opponent. The lie of negative emotions. It is common in superficial literature to classify emotions as good and bad. We are told we must eliminate the bad ones. Metaphysics corrects this error. There are no bad emotions, only poorly polarized or unbalanced emotions. Anger, correctly polarized, is the force of justice and determination to change an unacceptable situation. Without that energy, we would be passive slaves. Sadness, correctly polarized, is the depth of reflection and the ability to let go of what no longer serves. Pride, raised in degree, becomes dignity and honor. The goal is not emotional castration, turning into a flat and always smiling being. The goal is mastery over the intensity and direction of energy. You must be able to feel anger when necessary to defend a boundary, and then, at will, transmute it back into serenity. The danger lies in getting fixed at an extreme pole. Chronic anger turns into bitterness and destroys the body. Chronic euphoria turns into mania and disconnects from reality. Dynamic balance is the goal. Via the emotional pendulum and stability. In times of crisis, the emotional pendulum of humanity oscillates with violence. One day there is blind hope, the next total despair. If you tie your boat to this pendulum, you will become seasick and shipwrecked. Transmutation allows you to cut the rope. You can observe the collective movement toward panic and say, that is the vibration of the mass. I choose to vibrate in prudence. You can observe the movement toward the irrational euphoria of markets or fashions and say, I choose to vibrate in temperance. This ability to dissociate from the reigning polarity is what we call sovereignty. It is the construction of an internal microclimate. There may be a snowstorm outside, but in your mind, you keep the fire burning. You do not deny the snow, you wrap up to go out into it, but you do not allow the cold to put out your internal hearth. Many will believe you are cold or indifferent. They will not understand how you can maintain calm when you should be terrified or indignant. They will call you insensitive. But it is precisely that stability that will allow you to be a pillar of support for those same people who criticize you when their own worlds collapse. 7. The practice of elevation. How is this practiced in the trenches of the day-to-day? Imagine you receive alarming news about your finances. Your mind, by habit, tends to polarize toward fear and scarcity, the negative pole of wealth. You feel the knot in your stomach. The first step is stopping. Do not feed the thought. The second step is identification. I am polarizing toward fear. The third step is transmutation. Use an image, an affirmation, or a memory that evokes security and capacity. Do not lie to yourself by saying, I am a millionaire, if you are not. Say, I have the capacity to generate. I have overcome crises before. I am ingenious. Wealth is an energy and I can attract it. Slide the dial from I am lost to I am challenged. Challenge is a higher vibration than loss. It is active, not passive. Do the same with offenses. If someone insults you, feel the blow, but do not accept it. Transmute the offense into pity for the ignorance of the offender, or into masterly indifference. Refuse to lower your vibration to the level of the insult. Stay in the heights. As the ancients say, the eagle does not hunt flies. 5. The unity of opposites. At the highest level of understanding, The adept realizes that opposites not only meet, but are necessary for one another. Without the resistance of the air, the bird could not fly. Without gravity pulling it down, it would have no muscles to stand upright. Without the current chaos, you would not be forced to seek a higher order. The negative pole, evil, difficulty, the obstacle, are not errors of creation. They are the necessary counterweight for movement and growth to exist. If everything were infinite light, we could not distinguish forms. We need shadow to see volume. By understanding this, you stop resenting the negative pole of your life. You stop hating your problems. You see them as the weight in the gym, a heavy object designed not to crush you, but to strengthen you. Bless your enemy, for he gives you the opportunity to practice patience and strategy. Bless scarcity, for it forces you to sharpen your wit. Bless chaos, for it is the fuel of your awakening. This is the supreme transmutation, turning the curse into a blessing through the change of perspective. When you are able to see the utility in adversity, you have conquered duality. Now nothing can hurt you because everything that arrives in your life is used by your mind as construction material. Chapter 4. Rhythm. Understanding the pendulum of history. Cycles, rises and falls. The fourth great Hermetic principle introduces us to the mechanics of universal movement. If polarity taught us that opposites are extremes of the same thing, rhythm teaches us how energy shifts between those extremes. The axiom reads, "Everything flows out and in, everything has its tides, all things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates." We live in a universe that breathes. Inhalation and exhalation. Creation and destruction. Life and death. Nothing in manifested existence remains static. The illusion of permanence is the main cause of human suffering in times of change. Man, in his ignorance, wishes for summer to be eternal, for youth not to wither, and for the prosperity of his empires to know no decline. However, the law of rhythm is inexorable. You cannot negotiate with the tide. The chaos you perceive today in social, economic, and political structures is not an error in the system. It is the downward movement of the pendulum of history. It is the inevitable winter that follows a long autumn of decadence. Understanding this is not fatalism, it is the basis of strategy. He who ignores the rhythm is crushed by the wheel. He who understands it learns to turn with it, or better yet, to place himself at the axis where movement is minimal. The breath of empires. Observe history with the coldness of an anatomist. No civilization, however powerful, has escaped the law of rise and fall. Babylon, Egypt, Rome. All were born from a vital impulse, reached their zenith of splendor, stagnated in complacency, and finally collapsed under their own weight or before younger, more vigorous forces. The error of modern man is believing that his technological civilization has overcome this law. He believes he has conquered nature and that progress is an upward straight line toward infinity. Metaphysics corrects this arrogance. Progress is a spiral, not a straight line. And every spiral has ascending and descending sections. We find ourselves undoubtedly in a section of contraction. Structures that seemed solid are liquefying. Social cohesion is dissipating. This generates panic in the masses, who interpret the change of season as the end of the world. But winter is not the end of nature. It is its period of rest, of purification and death. It is the death of the old to make way for the new. The law of compensation acts here with mathematical precision. The measure of the swing to the right, expansion, excess, unbridled materialism, determines the measure of the swing to the left, contraction, scarcity, forced spirituality, or nihilism. We have lived an era of unprecedented material expansion. By law, we must face an era of proportional readjustment. Do not weep for the fallen leaves. They are the fertilizer of the future. The wise man does not try to glue the leaves back to the branches. He prepares to survive the cold and preserve his seeds for the next spring. 2. The emotional pendulum. This law governs not only the destiny of nations, but also the intimacy of your own psyche. You are a universe in miniature, and as such, you are subject to the tides. You have surely experienced periods of great enthusiasm, of inexhaustible energy, where everything seems easy and the world smiles at you. And for no apparent cause, that period is followed by one of apathy, heaviness, doubt, and creative sterility. The ignorant man blames himself. He believes he has lost something, that he has failed, or he frantically seeks external stimuli to force the return of euphoria. He does not understand that his emotional state is a pendulum. If he allowed himself to swing too far toward uncontrolled euphoria, the law will drag him with equal force toward deep depression. Oscillation is inevitable in the lower planes of consciousness. The mind of the mass is a ship without a rudder in a stormy sea, rising to the crest of the wave of hope one day and falling into despair. In times of global chaos, this oscillation becomes frantic. Society becomes bipolar, alternating between irrational panic and absurd denial. 3. The art of neutralization. Are we then condemned to be puppets of rhythm? Must we resign ourselves to rising and falling, suffering and enjoying without any control? This is where Hermetic teaching offers one of its most valuable and secret keys, the law of neutralization. The axiom says that rhythm compensates, but the masters discovered that the law of rhythm operates on two main planes: the lower plane, material, emotional consciousness, and the higher plane, spiritual consciousness, will. One cannot nullify the law of rhythm. The pendulum must move. But one can escape its negative effects by rising to the higher plane. Imagine a physical pendulum swinging. If you are an ant located on the lower part of the weight, you will travel a great distance from one end to the other, suffering the violence of the movement. But if you climb up the string toward the point of anchorage, the movement is reduced. At the exact point of the axis, the movement is almost imperceptible, even though the weight below continues to swing furiously. Neutralizing the rhythm means polarizing oneself in the higher self and refusing to allow the downward movement of the pendulum to drag your mood. When you feel the tide going out, that sadness or collective pessimism tries to drag you. You do not deny the feeling, but you refuse to identify with it. You assert yourself in your center. You say, "This is the rhythm operating. My environment is falling, but I am not my environment. I remain." You let the pendulum swing below you. You observe the crisis, you feel it pass, but you do not get on it. You keep your balance and your judgment intact. This is the mental firmness that distinguishes the initiate from the neophyte. The initiate seems to have supernatural stability, but it is not magic. It is the conscious application of the law of neutralization. He refuses to be compensated backward because he has mastered his forward swing. Face it, the strategy of the seasons. To navigate chaos, one must learn to work with the rhythm, not against it. There is a time to sow and a time to harvest, a time to expand and a time to consolidate. The most common strategic error is trying to act in summertime when reality is in wintertime. When the rhythm is ascending, times of prosperity, openness, ease, the wise man acts, builds, invests, and shows himself to the world. He takes advantage of the favorable current. When the rhythm is descending, times of crisis, restriction, darkness, the wise man does not despair nor try to force the expansion. He does not try to force expansion that the environment cannot support. Instead, he changes tactics. He withdraws strategically, conserves resources, studies, plans, strengthens his internal defenses, and polishes his weapons. The apparent inaction of winter is in reality intense internal action. It is gestation. The foolish man wastes his reserves trying to maintain a summer lifestyle in the middle of a historical winter. He exhausts himself fighting against the inevitable contraction. The wise man adapts. He reduces his surface area of exposure, becomes austere, efficient, and patient. He knows that the pendulum by law must rise again, and when it does he will be rested and prepared, while the fools will have perished from exhaustion. The illusion of the end. The most insidious characteristic of the downward movement of the pendulum is that it seems final. When a society enters a crisis, the collective mind, trapped in fear, projects that crisis toward the infinite future. This will never end, they say. All is lost forever. Similarly, when the pendulum is high, human arrogance believes that growth is unlimited and that we have defeated history. Both stances are false. Nothing is final. neither glory nor ruin. This understanding grants you an immense tactical advantage: perspective. When everyone around you is selling out of panic, believing the world is ending, you will know it is the time to buy, metaphorically and literally, because you know the rebound is inevitable. When everyone is euphoric and careless, you will know it is time to be prudent because the fall is approaching. Rhythm allows you to be a rational prophet. You do not need crystal balls. You only need to observe the position of the pendulum. If it has gone too far to the right, prepare for the blow from the left. If the darkness is very deep, prepare for the dawn. Fee compensation and payment. The law of rhythm entails the law of compensation. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. This has a brutal application in personal life. If you desire great successes, great heights, and great loves, you must be willing to endure the opposing tensions. One cannot ask for a mountain without accepting the valley that defines it. Modern society, in its immaturity, seeks constant pleasure and the elimination of pain. It seeks a life that is only pendulum to the right. This is a violation of natural law. Whoever seeks only pleasure ends up finding the pain of boredom or addiction. Whoever seeks only security ends up finding the paralysis of fear. The metaphysician accepts the price. He knows that every achievement carries a sacrifice, that every expansion requires a prior or subsequent contraction. He does not seek perpetual happiness, which is a static chimera. He seeks dynamic balance and the ability to endure tensions. In the midst of chaos, many ask, why do we suffer so much? The answer is compensation. We have lived on borrowed time, consuming future resources, ignoring essential truths, and building on sand. Current suffering is the payment of that debt. It is not a divine punishment. It is an accounting adjustment of the universe. Accept the payment. Do not resist. Pay the debt of ignorance with pain if necessary, and remain free to start a new cycle. Resistance to payment only accumulates interest. 7. The axis of the wheel. Imagine a wheel spinning at high speed. At the edge, the movement is dizzying, blurry, chaotic. If you live on the periphery of your being, in your reactive emotions, in your social status, in your possessions, you will live dizzy, subject to the violence of centrifugal force. But at the center of the wheel, at the axis, there is stillness. The wheel turns, but the axis remains. Your spiritual task is to move from the periphery to the center. Stop identifying with what you have or what you feel, and start identifying with what you are. The I am is the axis. The world changes, your body ages, your fortune fluctuates, your friends come and go. But the observer, the silent witness within you, is immutable. When chaos strikes, withdraw to the axis. From there, you will see the drama of history unfold without being crushed by its gears. You will see empires fall like one who sees leaves fall in autumn, with a bit of melancholy perhaps, but without terror, knowing that the tree of life still stands. Fate, mastery of time. Rhythm is in essence time. Controlling your reaction to rhythm is controlling your perception of time. For the one who suffers, a day is a century. For the one who enjoys, a century is a day. The adept manipulates this perception. In times of winter, he cultivates infinite patience. He knows how to wait. He does not have the neurotic haste of the modern world. Haste is the enemy of rhythm. Whoever rushes stumbles over the law. He tries to harvest before the fruit ripens. He tries to force a solution when the problem has not yet finished manifesting. In the current crisis, we are demanded immediate solutions. We want the chaos to end now. But chaos has its own digestion time. It must exhaust its kinetic energy. The patience of the metaphysician is not passivity. It is an active and alert waiting. It is the patience of the predator, waiting for the exact moment to pounce, or of the farmer waiting for the rain. Tune yourself to the natural rhythm of events. Do not push the river. Flow with it, but keep your head above water. Chapter 5. Cause and Effect. The Inevitability of the Harvest. Radical responsibility versus modern immediacy. The sixth great Hermetic principle contains the most sober, and at the same time, the most empowering truth of all those that make up the structure of reality. Its statement is final. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. We live in an ordered cosmos, not in a theater of chance. The belief in coincidence is the superstition of the ignorant. There is no such thing as an isolated event, orphaned of origin. From the movement of the farthest galaxy to the blink of your eye at this instant, everything obeys an uninterrupted chain of antecedents and consequence. However, the modern mind, sick with immediacy and intoxicated with pride, has declared war on this principle. Contemporary man lives under the illusion that he can cheat the consequence. He believes he can sow winds without reaping whirlwinds. He believes he can devour without nourishing himself, spend without producing, and corrupt without decomposing. Today's culture is a factory of effect seekers. Wealth, effect, is desired without the discipline of saving and investing, cause. Health, effect, is desired without renouncing the poisons of the palate and laziness, cause. Wisdom, effect, is desired without the sacrifice of study and experience, cause. This cognitive disconnection is the deep root of modern anxiety. When one expects an effect without having placed the cause, one lives in perpetual frustration. And when one places a negative cause and is surprised by the painful effect, one lives in victimhood. Metaphysics comes to restore sanity. The harvest is inevitable. No one mocks the law. What you are living today, in your body, in your pocket, and in your soul, is the mathematical exactitude of what you, consciously or unconsciously, set in motion yesterday. By the death of luck. To enter the domain of this principle, we must first murder the concept of luck. Luck is the consolation of the weak. It is the word we use to not admit our inability to see the connection between events. If a stone falls from a mountain and hits a traveler, the neophyte will say, bad luck. The hermeticist will say, causality. There was rain that eroded the earth. There was gravity that attracted the mass. There was a decision by the traveler to be on that path at that precise hour. An infinity of causes converged at an inevitable point. By denying luck, one also denies the injustice of fate. If life hits you, it is not because the universe has a grudge. It is not because the gods played dice with your existence. It is because you have placed yourself, by action or omission, in the trajectory of the blow. This truth is bitter, but it is the only one that liberates. If your misfortune were luck, you would be helpless, at the mercy of a cosmic whim. But if your misfortune is causality, then you have the power to study the cause, understand it, and generate a new cause that produces a different effect. The man who believes in luck is a slave. He waits for something external, the lottery, a political savior, an economic miracle, to change his life. The man who understands cause and effect is a master. He does not wait, he manufactures. He knows that if he mixes blue and yellow, he will get green, today, tomorrow, and forever. He does not pray for red to come out, he simply changes the mixture. The pathology of immediacy. The greatest enemy of understanding this law in the current era is the collapse of perceived time. Technology has accustomed us to a distorted relationship between desire and satisfaction. We press a button and the light turns on. We touch a screen and food appears. This technological magic has atrophied our understanding. It has atrophied our understanding of natural processes. Nature, which is the supreme teacher, knows no immediacy. Between the sowing of the seed and the harvest of the wheat, there is a time of gestation, of darkness under the earth, of slow and silent growth. Modern man has forgotten the interval. When he plants a cause, a bad financial decision, a toxic habit, a lie, and does not see the immediate effect, ruin, illness, discovery, he arrogantly assumes that he has gotten away with it. Nothing happened, he says, and he keeps planting. But the law does not forget. The law accumulates. The interval is not an absence of consequence, it is the gestation of it. The crisis that explodes today in your life did not appear this morning. It is the result of years of small, ignored causes. Sudden illness is the sum of thousands of meals and omissions. Sudden divorce is the sum of thousands of unspoken words and subtle contempts. Immediacy blinds us to accumulation. We live in a society that rewards the short term and punishes long-range vision, but the universe operates in deep time. The harvest always arrives, and it usually arrives with compound interest. 3. Radical responsibility. We arrive here at the point most difficult to digest. If every effect has its cause, and your current life is an effect, then you are the cause. Not your parents, not your government, not your economy, not your childhood trauma. You. Of course, external causes exist. You did not choose the country where you were born, nor your genetics. Those are the cards that were dealt to you, previous causes perhaps of heritage or karma according to your belief. But how you play those cards is entirely your present causality. Radical responsibility is the total acceptance that your current position is the exact result of your best and worst decisions. It is the sum of those decisions added to your reaction to the decisions of others. The ego hates this idea. The ego screams, "I didn't cause myself to be fired. I didn't cause my partner to betray me." Metaphysics responds, perhaps you did not cause the specific event directly, but you caused the vulnerability to it. You caused the choice of that work environment or that partner from a state of lack or blindness. You caused the lack of boundaries that allowed the abuse. You caused the lack of savings that makes being fired a tragedy instead of an opportunity. By accepting responsibility, you cease to be a victim of circumstances. You become an architect of circumstances. As long as you blame another, you hand over your power to that other. If the government is to blame for your poverty, then you must wait for the government to change to be rich. If you are the one responsible, you can start working this very day. IV, the chain of events. To get out of chaos, you must learn to see the chain. Nothing is spontaneous. Observe your thoughts. They are the first causes. A repeated thought becomes an action. A repeated action becomes a habit. A settled habit becomes a character. A defined character becomes a destiny. If you do not like your destiny, the final effect, do not fight against it. Go back in the chain. You cannot change the destiny already manifested, but you can change the thought that is generating it again in this instant. The problem is that most men are unconscious of their thoughts. They are thought by the collective mind, by the news, by the opinion of others. They are effects of external causes. They move like pawns on the chessboard of life, pushed by the wills of others who are stronger, by heritage, by suggestion, and by the environment. The Hermetic Master rises above the plane of ordinary causality. He becomes a player. He does not deny that external influences exist, but he uses his will to neutralize them and generate new causes from his own center. Sowing in winter. The current chaos, the global crisis that envelops us, is a harvest. It is the accumulated effect of decades, perhaps centuries, of materialism, spiritual disconnection, greed, and lack of purpose. We are eating the bitter fruits of a tree that we collectively planted a long time ago. We cannot prevent the current harvest from being bitter. It is already here. The dish is served. But here lies the power of the principle. While the world laments over the rotten harvest, the wise man is busy planting the seeds for the next season. He knows that winter will pass, law of rhythm, and that what he plants today in the midst of cold and darkness will inevitably determine. It will determine what he will eat in the spring. Most people, paralyzed by the horror of the present effect, stop generating positive causes. They get depressed, they withdraw, they stop working, they stop creating. What for, they say, if everything is wrong? By doing this, they are sowing the famine of the future. They are guaranteeing that the next harvest will be the same or worse than the current one. You must have the mental discipline to operate in two times, accepting the present as a payment of past debts without complaint, and working in the present as an investment in future glories without pause. If today you plant discipline, study, saving, strengthening of character, and useful service, the law of cause and effect guarantees you, with the certainty of the sunrise, that your future will be prosperous, regardless of what the rest of the world does. You create your own economy, health, and peace through relentless accumulation. Finally, the flight forward. There is a dangerous trap in modernity, the flight forward. The attempt to cover a negative effect with a quick cause that generates a worse effect in the long term. A man feels empty, effect of lack of purpose. To not feel it, he drugs himself with entertainment or substances, false cause. This generates addiction. This generates addiction and mental deterioration, a new worse effect. To cover that deterioration, he seeks more stimuli. It is debt paid with more debt. It is a lie covered with a larger lie. This dynamic is what has brought our civilization to the edge of the abyss. We have tried to cheat the law by postponing payment, but the law collects interest. To get out of personal chaos, you must stop the flight. You must stand firm and say this far. You must be willing to pay the price for your past errors. If you have debts, pay them with austerity. If you have broken relationships, repair them with humility or close them with honor. If you have a sick body, heal it with discipline. Do not look for shortcuts. The shortcut is a geometric illusion on the moral plane. The straight line of effort is always the shortest distance between two real points. Every attempt to evade the consequence only prolongs the suffering. Face the effect, assume it. Fifth, superior mental causation. Superior planes dominate the inferior ones. A cause generated on the mental plane has more potency than a cause generated on the physical plane. Therefore, inner work is the most practical action that exists. It is not navel-gazing. It is the engineering of causes. If you act a lot in the physical world, work overtime, run from one place to another, but your mind is full of fear and lack, mental cause, your physical actions will be ineffective. You will be rowing hard, but with the anchor dropped. The mental cause, fear, nullifies the physical cause, work. On the contrary, if you order your mind, clarify your vision, and cultivate an unshakable certainty of success, superior mental cause, your physical actions, even if they are fewer in quantity, will be infinitely more potent in quality and effect. They will coincide with the current. They will attract the right circumstances. The miracle is not a violation of the law. It is the operation of laws that most do not know. It is the application of superior causes to neutralize inferior effects. Fate, the boomerang effect. Be careful with what you emit, because it always returns. Energy is circular. The thought of hate that you launch against a political or social enemy leaves you, hits the structure of the universe, and returns to its origin charged with more of the same. Whoever lives by hating lives in a hell of their own creation, not because they are punished by a vengeful God, but because they have become the magnet for their own vibration. If you desire for chaos to cease in your life, stop emitting chaos. Stop participating in gossip, in slander, in sterile complaining, in the prediction of disaster. Each of those actions is a small weed seed. Be impeccable with your word and with your intention. Be a source of noble causes. Emit order, emit calm, emit truth, emit help. At first, it will seem like it gets lost in the vacuum of an ungrateful world. But the law promises that it will return. Integrity is the best long-term investment. It aligns your individual will with the constructive will of the all, down to the inertia of the mass. You will see the masses running toward the precipice. You will see how people demand rights without responsibilities, pleasures without costs, and changes without transformation. The temptation will be to join them or try to stop them by standing in the middle. Both options are errors. You cannot violate the free will of others, nor can you stop the collective harvest of a civilization. What you can do is become an independent cause, a point of stability. When the mass acts by reaction, effect, you act by choice, cause. When the mass screams out of fear, you keep silent out of prudence. When the mass destroys, you build. By doing this, you separate yourself vibratory from the collective destiny. Although you live in the same city and under the same human laws, you inhabit a different causal reality. Your harvest will be different because your sowing was different. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee. It is not religious poetry. It is the mechanics of cause and effect applied with surgical precision. Chapter 6, The Illusion of Separation. The origin of human conflict. We have reached the Gordian knot of human existence. So far, we have studied how the mind creates reality, how the interior reflects the exterior, and how the laws of rhythm and cause govern the flow of events. But all those laws operate within a vaster setting, a setting that humanity has tragically misunderstood for millennia. That misunderstanding is the belief in separation. It is the conviction, rooted in the deepest part of the psyche, that I am an isolated entity, ending at the limits of my skin, and that you are another completely different, alien, and therefore potentially dangerous entity. It is the belief that the world is a set of disconnected fragments competing for limited resources in an indifferent vacuum. This idea, which seems so evident to the physical senses, is the great heresy. It is the foundational lie upon which all empires of war, exploitation, and misery have been built. Metaphysics does not waver on this point. Separation is an optical illusion of consciousness. It is a trick of perspective necessary for the experience of individuality, but fatal if taken as the ultimate truth. In times of chaos, this illusion solidifies. Fear contracts. Fear builds walls. When society falters, the primitive instinct is to close oneself off, define us against them, and seek security in exclusion. But the security offered by separation is the security of the cell, not that of the castle. The origin of all human conflict is not economic, nor political, nor territorial. Those are mere symptoms. The root cause is the inability to recognize that the other does not exist in the absolute sense. The other is invariably an aspect of oneself experiencing a variation of form, the geometry of the ego. To understand why the world bleeds in fratricidal struggles, we must dissect the architect of separation, the ego. The ego is not a demon to be exorcised, but a functional tool that has become tyrannical. Its original function is focus. For infinite consciousness to experience life as a John or a Mary, it must temporarily forget that it is the all. It must circumscribe, define, and limit itself. The ego is the rim of the glass that contains the ocean water so that it may be drunk. However, in its current state of hypertrophy, the ego has forgotten it is a glass. It believes itself to be the water itself, separate from the ocean. It has forgotten its origin, and by feeling isolated, it feels terror. The fundamental terror of the ego is annihilation. If I am separate, I am small. If I am small, I am vulnerable. If I am vulnerable, I must defend myself, accumulate, dominate, and destroy. I must destroy any potential threat before it destroys me. Here the logic of conflict is born. War is the ego's desperate attempt to ensure its survival at the expense of another part of the all. It is a metaphysical cancer, a cell that has forgotten it is part of a body and begins to devour neighboring cells. Modern humanity, in its cult of extreme individualism, has elevated the ego to the status of a god. Ruthless competition is celebrated, selfish accumulation is rewarded, and cooperation is despised as weakness. We have built a civilization based on the pathology of the cancer cell, and now we are surprised the organism is collapsing. 2. The cannibalism of the spirit. If we accept the metaphysical premise of unity, that there is only one life, one mind, and one substance manifesting in infinite forms, then every act of violence is an act of self-mutilation. When one man robs another, he impoverishes himself, for he reinforces in his own consciousness the idea of scarcity and separation. By believing he needs to take in order to have, he declares himself a beggar of the universe. When one man wounds another, he inscribes the vibration of the wound in his own soul. He cannot strike without being struck by the law of reaction, nor can he hate without being poisoned by his own secretion of hate. Human conflict is, in essence, spiritual cannibalism. We are devouring our own substance. In the current era, this cannibalism has become sophisticated. We no longer need clubs. We use words, laws, economic systems, and algorithms of exclusion. We group ourselves into tribes and use those labels as shields to dehumanize the adversary. But the dehumanization of the other inevitably entails the dehumanization of oneself. One cannot deny divinity in one's neighbor without denying divinity in oneself. By reducing your enemy to a caricature, you reduce yourself to a caricature of an avenger or judge. Both lose their real stature. Thirst, the mirages of difference. Look around you. The world screams differences at you. It tells you that man has a different skin color. That woman prays to another god. That group votes for another ideology. And the mind, trained in separation, catalogues, labels, and judges. Metaphysics asks you to look again. Look not with the eyes of the flesh, which only see surfaces, but with the eyes of understanding. Differences are real in form, but illusory in essence. They are the costumes of the play, not the actors. Imagine the ocean. On the surface, there are millions of waves. Some are high and violent, others soft and low. If a wave could speak, it would say, "I am distinct from that wave. I am better, bigger, more important. I must crush it." But if that wave looked down, toward its own base, it would discover that there is no place where it ends and the ocean begins. It would discover that all waves are simply the ocean rising temporarily. Humanity is that ocean. Wars are the waves striking each other, ignorant of their common depth. Current chaos feeds on the obsession with the surface. We define ourselves by the transitory, our political opinion, our social status, our nationality. These identities are masks. It is dangerous to confuse the mask with the face. When you defend your mask with violence, you have forgotten who the wearer of the mask is. You have fallen into the deep sleep of matter. IV, the projection of the shadow. Why do we hate with such intensity? Why does the mere existence of an opposing group generate such visceral repulsion in us? Depth psychology and metaphysics agree on the answer. We hate outside what we deny inside. The enemy is always a mirror of our shadow. The shadow is the reservoir of everything we have rejected in ourselves, our own violence, our own greed, our own intolerance, our own fear. Because the ego cannot accept that it possesses such negative traits, it projects them onto the other. They are the violent ones, we say, while supporting justified bombings. They are the ignorant ones, we say, while refusing to listen to contrary arguments. They are evil, we say, to feel by contrast like the good. Human conflict is a gigantic cinema projection room. We use rival nations and opposing political parties as blank screens upon which to project our internal demons. By fighting them, we mistakenly believe we are fighting evil, when in reality we are fighting our own repudiated image. This is why revolutions usually end up recreating the same tyranny they overthrew. The revolutionaries did not integrate their own shadow of power. They simply changed chairs. To stop the chaos, one must withdraw the projection. One must have the titanic courage to look at the enemy and say, "What I see in you also dwells in me." This recognition dissolves hatred and transforms it into something much more useful, strategic understanding or compassion. V, the fear of unity. Paradoxically, although we suffer from separation, we are terrified of unity. The ego fears fusion. The idea of "we are all one" sounds to the ego like death. If I am one with everyone, where do I remain? What happens to my special desires, my unique story, my superiority? This fear is the final barrier. It is the guardian of the threshold. We prefer the known pain of loneliness to the unknown abyss of communion. In today's society, this fear manifests as epidemic narcissism, the obsession with being special, with standing out, with being individually validated. The culture of the image is the temple of the separate ego. However, metaphysics teaches that unity is not uniformity. The hand and the foot are one with the body, but the hand does not cease to be a hand. By recognizing its unity with the body, the hand does not lose its function. On the contrary, it gains the power and intelligence of the entire organism. A severed hand is a piece of dead meat. A united hand is a living tool. By mentally uniting with humanity, you do not lose your individuality. You empower it. You cease to be an isolated fragment fighting the universe and become a channel through which the universe flows. Face the law of one in practice. How is this truth lived in a world that insists on war? Should we be passive, let ourselves be run over, smile at the tyrant? No. The understanding of unity does not imply the renunciation of action, nor the abolition of discernment. You can recognize the lion and the gazelle are expressions of the same life. But if you are the gazelle, you will not stay still to be devoured. The law of unity operates on the absolute plane. The law of survival operates on the relative plane. The Hermetic Master lives simultaneously on both planes. In the physical plane, he defends his space, protects his family, and opposes injustice. He sets firm limits. He says no with authority. But in the mental and spiritual plane, he does not hate the aggressor. He understands the aggressor is a part of himself that is confused, sick, or acting a necessary role in the cosmic drama. This double vision grants him an insuperable advantage. The common man fights with anger. Anger blinds him, exhausts him, and causes him to make mistakes. The master fights with equanimity. Because he does not hate, he sees clearly. Because he does not fear, he acts with surgical precision. He can imprison a criminal without the poison of resentment, like a surgeon removing a tumor. 7. The dissolution of internal borders. The global chaos we witness is the symptom of a fever. The earth is trying to shake off the infection of separation. The structures that divide, predatory economies, xenophobic nationalisms, dogmatic religions, are creaking because they are incompatible with the underlying reality of interconnection. Technology, ironically, has forced this understanding. What happens in an Eastern market affects the price of bread in the West. A virus does not respect customs. Reality is forcing us to understand that we are a single organism. You cannot save yourself alone in a luxury lifeboat while the ocean liner sinks. The destiny of the individual is irremediably intertwined with the destiny of the collective. Metaphysical work, therefore, consists of tearing down internal customs. Check your mind. Whom have you excluded from your heart? Whom do you consider less than human? Every person you expel from your compassion is a fragment of your own soul that you have left frozen on the outside, and that fragment will return to haunt you. Integration requires a conscious effort to see the hidden divinity even in the most abject. It is about recognizing the vital spark. 30. The sovereignty of belonging. By healing the illusion of separation, the primordial wound of abandonment is healed. Modern man feels alone in an empty universe. He believes no one will come to help him. This belief makes him rapacious and anxious, but when he wakes up to the reality of connection, loneliness disappears. He realizes he has never been alone, because loneliness is impossible in a universe where everything is interwoven. Nature is not out there. You are nature. Society is not them. You are society. The future is not a place you go to. It is a place created from shared consciousness. By reclaiming this sense of cosmic belonging, fear diminishes. And when fear diminishes, the need for conflict vanishes. You no longer need to snatch to have, because you know that by giving, you give to yourself. Generosity ceases to be a moral duty and becomes intelligent selfishness. 9. The end of the Civil War. The world is at war because each individual is in a civil war with themselves. The mind fights the heart. Desire fights duty. Reason fights intuition. We are fragmented inside, and therefore we project a fragmented world. World peace will not be signed in paper treaties between nations that distrust each other. World peace will begin when a sufficient number of individuals sign the peace treaty within themselves. When you stop judging yourself, you stop judging your neighbor. When you forgive your own errors, you forgive the errors of history. When you unify your own scattered parts, you become an agent of unification. Chaos is the result of millions of psyches screaming in dissonance. Order will be the result of millions of psyches vibrating in harmonic resonance. Chapter 7. The Veil of the Senses and the Immutable Truth. Distinguishing the signal from the noise. We have established that the universe is mental and that the outside is a reflection of the inside. However, to navigate chaos, the student faces a formidable adversary, a guardian who watches the gates of perception and who, if not mastered, becomes the jailer of consciousness. This adversary is none other than their own sensory apparatus. Physical senses, sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell, are magnificent tools for biological survival, but they are poor advisors for metaphysical truth. They are designed to report on the surface of things, not on their essence. They report on the transitory, not on the eternal. We live under the tyranny of appearance. The common man accepts the testimony of his eyes as the absolute truth. He says, "I see it, therefore it is real." But a stick submerged in water appears broken to the eye, although to the touch it remains straight. The sun appears to revolve around the earth, although we know it is an illusion of perspective. If our senses deceive us in the simple, how much more will they not deceive us in the complex? In times of chaos, this deception is amplified until it becomes a collective hallucination. The modern world is a machinery designed to saturate the senses, to dazzle the eye with strobe lights and deafen the ear with contradictory screams. The objective of this bombardment is to keep consciousness trapped on the periphery, far from the center where the immutable truth resides. Learning to distinguish the signal, the truth, from the noise, the illusion, is the supreme skill of the initiate. Without it, you will be swept away by every rumor and every fabricated fear, the nature of the veil. The ancient sages of the East called this world Maya, the great illusion. They did not mean that the world did not exist, but that it is not what it appears to be. It is a veil. Imagine that you attend a play. On the stage, one actor mourns the death of another. The audience, caught in the illusion, cries with him. They feel real anguish, an accelerated pulse, genuine sadness. But the wise man sitting in the last row observes the scene with calm. He knows that the dead man will rise at the fall of the curtain and dine with his killer. He knows that the tears are glycerin and that the stage is painted cardboard. The wise man has distinguished the signal, the reality of the actors in the play, from the noise, the emotional drama of the characters. Today, the play is global. News programs, opinion networks, economic crises, and political dramas are the representation on stage. They are noisy, colorful, and emotionally harrowing. They are designed to hijack your attention and make you forget that you are the immortal spectator, not the suffering character. The veil of the senses tells you that scarcity is real because you see empty shelves. The immutable truth tells you that abundance is the law of life and that scarcity is a temporary error. The veil tells you that hate is winning because you see violence in the streets. The truth tells you that love is the cohesive force of the universe and that hate is only the friction of ignorance, noisy but powerless in the long run. He who lives attached to the veil lives in perpetual terror. He who looks through it finds peace. Durst noise as a control strategy. Why is there so much noise? Why does modern civilization seem to conspire against silence? Because noise is the most effective control tool. A distracted mind is an obedient mind. A mind that jumps from one stimulus to another has no time to question, to go deep, nor to connect with its own sovereignty. The current chaos is not accidental. It is an ecosystem of distraction. You are bombarded with irrelevant information, with sterile debates, with images of greed and lust, with hypothetical fears about futures that will never arrive. This is noise. It is static. It is dust in the air. Its function is to hide the signal. The signal is the soft voice of your own intuition, the certainty of natural laws and the presence of being. The signal does not scream. Truth does not need advertising or neons. Truth simply is. Gravity does not need to convince you that it works. It simply holds you up. Noise, in contrast, needs constant validation. The lie must be repeated 1,000 times to be believed. Fear must be injected daily to stay alive. When you feel exhausted, confused, and anxious, it is because you have been trying to process noise as if it were vital information. You have been drinking salt water to quench your thirst. 3. Discernment, the sword of the initiate. To cut the veil, you need a weapon. That weapon is discernment, in Sanskrit viveka. It is the ability to separate the real from the unreal, the eternal from the transitory. Discernment is not intellectual intelligence. It is spiritual intelligence. There are very cultured people who absolutely lack discernment. They believe any fallacy if it comes wrapped in academic language or official authority. And there are simple people who possess a sharp discernment and can detect the lie in the gaze of a king. How is this sword sharpened? Through the relentless question, is this truth or is it only appearance? Only, before every news story that outrages you, ask, does this affect my essence or only my ego? Before every desire that consumes you, ask, does this be born from my soul or is it an implant of society? Before every fear, ask, is it a present and real danger or is it a projection of my imagination? Discernment requires stopping. Noise is based on speed. Discernment requires pause. Never accept a truth that is sold to you with hysterical urgency. The immutable truth is patient. It can wait for you to examine it. The lie is in a hurry because it fears being discovered. IV sensory intoxication. We must address the pathology of the era, addiction to stimulus. Modern man is a sensory addict. He cannot stand boredom. If he has a free minute, he looks for his screen. If he walks, he wears headphones. If he eats, he needs to watch something. He has atrophied his ability to be with himself. This intoxication blunts the internal sensor. When the physical senses are overstimulated, the subtle senses, intuition, telepathy, direct perception, turn off. It is like trying to hear a whisper in the middle of a nightclub. To distinguish the signal, you must practice sensory fasting. It is not about becoming an ascetic in a cave, but about deliberate periods of disconnection, turning off the noise of the world to recalibrate your instrument. Try to spend an hour doing nothing, without consuming information, music, or conversation, just existing. At first you will feel anxiety. Your mind will scream for distraction, but if you persist, the mental noise will settle like dust after a storm, and you will begin to perceive the signal. You will begin to remember who you are, what you really want, and what you must do. Those answers will never come from outside. Your silence has them. V. The truth about opinion. We live in the era of opinion. We are told that all opinions are respectable, and that everyone has their truth. Metaphysically, this is a dangerous error. There exist opinions which are subjective, changing, and often wrong. And there exist principles which are objective, immutable, and true. You can have the opinion that gravity is unfair, or the personal truth that you can fly if you flap your arms. But if you jump off a cliff, the law of gravity will ignore your opinion and smash you against the ground. Social chaos arises because we have elevated opinion to the rank of truth. We have forgotten the principles. The immutable truth is not democratic. It is not voted on. It does not depend on likes or the approval of the majority. That millions of people believe a lie does not make it a truth. That an injustice is legal does not make it just. The seeker of truth must be willing to be unpopular. He must be willing to see what is, not what the crowd says it is. Often, the signal is uncomfortable. Truth will tell you that you are responsible for your life. Uncomfortable. Noise will tell you that you are a victim. Comfortable and seductive. Truth will tell you that to succeed, you must strive and discipline yourself. Noise will sell you magic formulas for quick wealth. Distinguishing the signal is often choosing the path of greatest initial resistance, but of greatest final freedom. VC, the markers of truth. How to know if what we perceive is signal or noise. Universal markers exist. Immutability. Noise changes constantly. Today's fashion is tomorrow's trash. The signal remains. Ethical principles and natural laws do not go out of style. If something is new and urgent, it is likely noise. Coherence. Truth is a unified system. It does not contradict itself. Noise is full of contradictions. They tell you that you must have fear to be safe, that you must spend to be rich. The signal is geometrically perfect. Its pieces fit. The sensation of expansion versus contraction. Noise usually generates contraction. The signal generates expansion, peace, certainty, clarity. When you hear a truth, something inside you relaxes and says, yes, this is it. When you hear noise, something tenses up. Simplicity. Truth is usually simple. As within, so without. Noise is complex, bureaucratic, full of fine print. Servant, the eye of the hurricane. In the meteorology of chaos, a known phenomenon exists, the eye of the hurricane. In the center of the most destructive storm, there is a point of absolute calm and blue sky. That eye is the immutable truth within you. Everything that swirls around is the veil of the senses. It is turbulent, dangerous, and changing. If you try to fight against the winds of the periphery, you will be destroyed. If you take refuge in the eye, you will be safe. Spiritual practice is not stopping the hurricane, but positioning yourself in the eye. From there you observe the drama without being the drama. You see how the world crumbles and is rebuilt, but you know that your essence is untouchable. I am. That is the maximum signal. Everything else, I am poor, I am rich, I am young, I am old, is noise, temporary adjectives attached to the eternal noun. Fate, the manipulation of language. One of the most insidious forms of the veil today is the corruption of the word. Words are containers of consciousness. If the meaning is corrupted, the thought is corrupted. Noise calls freedom irresponsibility. It calls tolerance a lack of principles. It calls love emotional dependence. The initiate must clean his dictionary. He must rescue the original and vibrant meaning of words. He must call things by their name, even if the world uses euphemisms. Clarity in language leads to clarity in thought, and this to clarity in perception. Do not use the jargon of chaos. Do not repeat the empty slogans that the masses chant. Speak with precision. Your word is your staff of command. If your order is confused, reality will not know how to obey. Judge the test of time. Time is the great revealer. Time dissolves noise and polishes the signal. Look back at your own life 5 or 10 years ago. Do you remember that which worried you so much? That discussion that seemed like life or death? That news of the century? Today, all that is dust. It was noise. But what you learned about love, about honesty, about your own strength, that stays with you. That was signal. Apply this test to the present. When chaos assails you today, ask, will this matter 5 years from now, 50, at the moment of my death? If the answer is no, it is noise. Treat it as such. Attend to it if necessary, but do not give it your heart. If the answer is yes, it is signal. Defend it with your life. The wise man lives sub specie eternitatis, under the perspective of eternity. He does not measure events by their impact on the news, but on the evolution of his soul. X-ray vision. Developing the ability to distinguish the signal from the noise grants you a kind of X-ray vision. You look at a politician screaming and you don't see a powerful leader. You see a scared child seeking approval, signal, disguised as authority, noise. You look at an advertisement that promises happiness and you don't see the product. You see the manipulation of human lack, signal, disguised as a solution, noise. You look at a crisis and you don't see the end. You see the painful birth of a new order. This vision makes you immune to manipulation. You can no longer be deceived with colored mirrors. You become dangerous to the system of control, because a man who sees the truth cannot be enslaved by the lie. But you also become more compassionate. By seeing the essence behind the appearance, you understand that most of the evils are just ignorance. Kerke, the discipline of attention. To conclude this principle, we return to the fundamental tool, attention. Your attention is your most valuable asset. It is the energy that gives life to things. If you pay attention to noise, noise grows in your reality. If you pay attention to the signal is amplified. The current chaos competes fiercely for your gaze. Red headlines, notifications, scandals. They are energy thieves. You have the sovereign right to withdraw your gaze. Imagine that you are the conductor of an orchestra. The world is playing a detuned cacophony. You can lower the baton and stop conducting that music in your mind. You can turn toward the internal orchestra and ask for a different melody. Do not feel guilty for not being informed of every detail of the global disaster. Being informed of the illusion does not help you change it. Being connected with the truth does. The world does not need more witnesses to the noise. There are already billions. The world needs receivers of the signal. It needs lighthouses that, in the middle of the fog, know where the immutable coast is and point to it without wavering. Chapter 8, Internal Sovereignty, the Unassailable Castle. Self-mastery in the face of external manipulation. The principles of the cosmos and the illusions of the untrained eye have been revealed. Yet the law remains sterile without a legislator to apply it. Knowing the universe is mental serves little if your own mind is occupied by foreign forces or if you are perpetually an effect of the causes of others. We arrive at the central concept of metaphysical freedom, sovereignty. In common terms, it refers to a state governing itself without interference. Metaphysically, it is the inalienable authority of the individual to govern their own inner realm, thoughts and emotions, without being enslaved by the environment or low instincts. We live in an era of spiritual vassalage. Iron chains have been replaced by chains of suggestion and induced desire. Modern man feels free choosing cereal brands or entertainment channels, yet he is a slave in his own home. His attention is looted, his will is hijacked, and his mood is dictated by the headlines of the day. He has abdicated the throne. He has left the gates of his castle wide open, allowing merchants and thieves into his throne room to dictate the laws of his existence. Reclaiming internal sovereignty is not political rebellion. It is a hierarchical restoration. It is reseating the higher self on the throne and taming the ego. The siege of the citadel. Imagine your psyche as a fortified citadel holding the universe's most valuable treasures, your vital energy, creative capacity, and peace. This citadel is under constant siege by subtle forces seeking to colonize your mental space. Every advertisement is an invasion attempt trying to implant a sense of lack. Every alarmist news story is a fire arrow aimed at your walls to cause panic and drive you from your refuge. Every unsolicited opinion or demand is a battering ram hitting your gates. The goal of the siege is the surrender of your will. The world wants you to react, buy, vote, and hate. It wants you to be a predictable gear. Most people surrendered long ago, handing over the keys and becoming conquered provinces. If the world says be afraid, they tremble. The sovereign, however, keeps the drawbridge up. He observes the siege from the highest tower, impassive. He knows external noise has no authority within his walls unless he grants it audience. To the abdication of the throne. How is sovereignty lost? Not by one great defeat, but through small daily abdications. You abdicate your throne whenever you say yes when you meant no, or when you seek external validation to feel worthy. You abdicate when you allow a stranger's rudeness to ruin your morning or sacrifice long-term goals for pleasure. The mechanism of abdication is reactivity. The slave reacts, the king acts. Reaction is mechanical and automatic, like a knee reflex. If someone insults you and you get angry automatically, you are a slave. The other person has the remote control of your emotions. One word altered your pulse and thought. He is the master. Action, however, is deliberate and born from silence. If someone insults you and you choose to ignore it or respond with calm, you are the king. The insult reached your ears, but did not penetrate your sanctuary. You chose your response. Reclaiming sovereignty begins by observing your reactions and seeing who pulls the strings. 3. Building the walls, the holy no. To govern, one must define boundaries. A kingdom without borders is just a public wasteland. Sovereignty requires building psychological and energetic walls. These are not walls of fear-based isolation, but selection filters born of wisdom. The primary tool for building these walls is the word no. The no is sacred. It is the ultimate act of definition. By saying no to what does not serve you or distracts you, you are saying yes to your own purpose. Modern man is terrified of no, fearing offense or lost opportunities. Consequently, he lives fragmented, serving 1,000 masters and none. The sovereign exercises no with elegance and steely firmness. He says no to trivial conversations that drain energy and social commitments that do not resonate with his spirit. He says no to self-pity. Walls must be high for noise and low for truth. Your mind is your palace. Do not let anyone enter with dirty shoes. The treasury of attention. Every kingdom has a treasure. Your inner treasure is not gold, but attention. Attention is the currency used to buy reality. What you attend to comes alive. What you withdraw from withers. The external siege seeks to loot this treasury. Media, corporations, and ideologues are all beggars or thieves crying for your gaze. Common men squander their fortune, throwing attention at every passing stimulus or the lives of strangers. By the end of the day, they are energetically bankrupt, with no attention left for their own growth. The sovereign is stingy with his attention, considering it a finite and precious resource. He invests it. When the world screams for attention, the sovereign asks, "Does this add value to my kingdom?" If not, he withdraws his gaze without guilt. This selective indifference is the most powerful shield. Being able to not have an opinion or not know about something is a sign of high spiritual status. V. The will of the monarch. At the castle's center lies the will. We must distinguish between will and desire. Desire is the whim of rebellious ministers, volatile, loud, and urgent. Desire is a child tyrant. Will is the voice of the king, silent, constant, and deep. It does not scream, it orders towards a greater purpose. Modern man confuses desire with will, thinking he is free because he does what he wants, unaware his desires are external programs or biological impulses. "I do what I want," says the addict, blindly obeying a substance. That is not freedom. It is slavery to impulse. Internal sovereignty is won when will subdues desire. This does not mean repression. The king governs his subjects. The sovereign enjoys pleasures but is not ruled by them. He can feast or fast as needed. The exercise of will is like training a muscle. Every time you postpone immediate gratification for a higher good, you strengthen your scepter of command. Vast emotional immunity. An unassailable castle must be immune to emotional provocation. Today's society is an emotional minefield designed to outrage or sadden. The sovereign cultivates emotional immunity, the ability to feel without being dragged away. It is the difference between being a thermometer and being a thermostat. A thermometer is a slave to the environment, rising or falling with the outside temperature. A thermostat is the master, working to adjust the environment to an internally set temperature. To be sovereign, you must become a thermostat, deciding the peace or determination of your kingdom regardless of the outside cold. This requires a stoic practice of detachment, observing emotions like clouds passing through the sky of consciousness. "There goes a cloud of anger," says the observer, but the sky is not the cloud. When you stop identifying with emotions, saying, "I feel sadness" instead of "I am sad," you recover your power. 7th, internal law. Every sovereign state is ruled by a constitution. You must write yours. Most people live by unwritten laws absorbed from culture, the normal, or what people will say. The sovereign burns society's rulebook and writes his own. What are your non-negotiable values? What is success for you, not for your neighbor? If you do not have a plan for your life, you will fall into someone else's plan, and they likely have little planned for you except to use you as a resource. Having a clear internal law simplifies life. When faced with a dilemma, the sovereign consults his internal constitution and answers no if it violates his law. This integrity is the toughest armor. A man who knows who he is and what he stands for is impossible to manipulate. He cannot be bribed with false promises because he already possesses his own treasure. He cannot be threatened with ostracism because he is his own best company. Fe'akit, the silence of power. True kings and masters speak little and do not justify themselves. Noise is a sign of weakness. Shouting tries to compensate for a lack of authority. Sovereignty dwells in silence. The unassailable castle does not need daily press releases to prove strength. Its walls speak for themselves. Learn to keep silent about your plans. Energy spent talking is energy subtracted from doing. Learn silence before offense. The absence of reaction tells the offender their attack was irrelevant. In silence, you accumulate power and hear the voice of intuition, which is the king's loyal advisor. TREATISE, the solitude of the throne. Assuming sovereignty implies accepting a certain solitude. By rising above the reactive mass, you may find yourself walking alone. Old friends may feel uncomfortable with your new presence and call you arrogant or distant. They may try to drag you back to the mud of shared victimization. Do not yield. This solitude is the clean air of the summit, not the isolation of a hermit who hates the world, but the distance of a guardian who watches it. In time, your sovereignty will attract other sovereigns, creating alliances based on mutual respect rather than neurotic attachment. X. Radical self-respect. The foundation of sovereignty is self-respect. You cannot govern a kingdom you despise. If you speak to yourself with contempt or violate your own promises, no sovereignty is possible. The king treats himself with dignity, not out of vanity, but out of reverence for the divine spark he carries. Treat yourself as you would a high dignitary. Nourish yourself with the best food, impressions, and knowledge. Keep your environment orderly, as physical chaos reflects a neglected court. Do not allow self-denigrating thoughts. When you respect yourself radically, the world follows suit. Thus, diplomacy and war. Being sovereign does not mean constant war. The good king prefers diplomacy. You can interact with the world of chaos, but you do so from the position of a foreign power. You visit the chaos, but you do not naturalize in it. When boundaries are violated, the sovereign acts with strategic force, never passion. Chapter 9: Generation, the balance of creative forces. Action and reception. The seventh and last Hermetic principle closes the circle of manifestation. Its statement is brief, but its implications encompass the totality of the cosmos. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. The word gender derives from the Latin root meaning to generate, to procreate, to create. This principle must not be confused with biological sexuality, which is merely its physical manifestation on the organic plane. The principle of generation is a universal law of creation. Nothing, absolutely nothing, comes into existence without the interaction of two complementary forces, one that initiates and another that receives, one that projects and another that gestates, one active and another passive. We live in a generative universe. Creation was not a single event. It is a continuous process. In this precise instant, stars are being born, cells are dividing, and thoughts are taking shape. However, modern man suffers from a crisis of metaphysical sterility. Despite his frenetic activity, his constant doing, he feels powerless. He feels his efforts bear no fruit, that his projects are born dead or deformed. The cause of this impotence is the imbalance of the creative forces within him. He has forgotten how to marry his will with his imagination. He has divorced action from reception. In times of chaos, understanding this balance is vital. Chaos is raw energy. To order it, one must become a father and a mother to his own destiny. The anatomy of creation. To understand why we fail in our attempts to change our reality, we must study the mechanics of generation. Every creation requires a father and a mother. On the plane of electricity, we have the positive and negative poles. On the plane of the atom, we have the proton and the electron. On the mental plane, where you operate as the architect of your life, we have the conscious mind, will, intellect, and the subconscious mind, emotion, imagination. The masculine principle is the penetrating, directive, electric, and projective force. It is the will. Its function is to give the seed, the structure, and the impulse. The feminine principle is the receptive, magnetic, protective, and gestating force. It is the imagination. Its function is to receive the seed, nourish it, give it form and substance, and finally, give birth to it. Neither is superior to the other. Without the masculine, the feminine is a fertile but sterile field. Without the feminine, the masculine is a blind force, a seed thrown upon a rock, an impulse of action that exhausts itself without producing a work. The tragedy of the contemporary individual is that he operates with only one of these principles, or with both in civil war. The pathology of masculine excess, action without soul. Observe today's society. We see an excessive cult of action, productivity, cold logic, and material conquest. This is a hypertrophy of the masculine principle detached from its counterpart. The man and woman, under this influence, lives in the culture of effort. He believes that to achieve he must push and struggle. He operates exclusively from the conscious will. He plans, executes, competes, but this action lacks magnetism. It is dry. It is hard. By not being fecundated by deep emotion and intuition, his creations are fragile and mechanical. He generates wealth, but not prosperity. He generates buildings, but not homes. The result is burnout. Human will is limited. If used as a constant hammer without allowing the rest and nourishment of the receptive part, it breaks. Modern chaos is, in large part, the noise of millions of hammers striking without a plan and without a purpose, directed by egos that have forgotten how to feel. The pathology of feminine excess, the dream without land. At the other end of the pendulum, we find the opposite reaction. The cult of passivity, of magical manifestation without work, emotional victimhood, and escapist fantasy. Here, the individual takes refuge in his imagination. He dreams of a better world, visualizes riches, yet lacks the will to anchor those dreams in matter. This is the trap of superficial spirituality. It is believed that desiring is enough to obtain. It is forgotten that the desire must be fecundated by action. The result is frustration and paralysis. Energy stagnates. The person becomes volatile, unable to sustain discipline, living in a world of pure potential. For the sacred marriage, inner alchemy. True generation occurs only when the sacred marriage is celebrated within the psyche. The metaphysician is neither purely active nor purely passive. He is androgynous in his mental operation. To create anything, he must follow the rite of generation. The conception, union. The conscious will, masculine, selects a clear idea. This idea is the seed. Then the will deposits this seed into the subconscious mind, feminine, with intensity and confidence. The gestation, feminine. Once the idea is planted, the feminine principle takes control. The seed must be left in the fertile darkness. Here enters faith and detachment. You do not dig up the seed every hour to see if it grows. You nourish the idea with visualization and the feeling that it is already real. The protection, masculine. While the idea gestates, the masculine principle stands guard. Its function is to protect the mother and the unborn child. It rejects doubts and blocks negative opinions. It is the guardian of the threshold that says no to everything that threatens the gestation. The birth action. The moment arrives when the idea matures and demands to be born. Here both principles collaborate. Intuition, feminine, says now, and will, masculine, executes the necessary physical action. If any step is missing, the process aborts. Will as the fecundator. Let us deepen the role of the will. Many confuse will with tension. In metaphysics, will is focus. It is the capacity to maintain attention on a single point until that point ignites. The masculine principle in you is focus. In a world of distraction, focus is the generative act par excellence. Most people are sterile because their attention is diffuse. They scatter their mental seed everywhere, a little on news, a little on gossip, a little on fear. This dispersion is metaphysical onanism. It is a waste of vital force. To generate a new reality, you must practice mental chastity. You must retain your seed, your attention and intention, and not spill it on trivialities. When you direct your concentrated will toward an image in your mind and hold it there, excluding all else, you are performing the act of cosmic love. You are forcing mental substance to take form. It is an act of authority. Imagination as matrix. Imagination has been dismissed by modern rationalism as childish fantasy. Nothing is further from the truth. Imagination is the matrix of reality. It is the workshop where the prototypes of all that will exist are woven. The feminine principle in you is the capacity to receive an abstract idea and clothe it in form. If your will says, I want health, your imagination must build the scene. How does health feel? What does it look like? You must feel the reality before it is physical. The problem is that most use their matrix to gestate monsters. They use imagination to visualize disasters, sickness, and betrayals. By doing so, the feminine principle, which is obedient and does not judge, says, granted. It proceeds to gestate ruin or loneliness with the same efficiency it would gestate wealth. Worry is the negative use of creative imagination. To exit chaos, you must purify the matrix and discipline your visualization. The cycle of giving and receiving. Generation also manifests in the flow of energy between you and the world. The masculine principle is giving. The feminine principle is receiving. The blockage of either stops the generation of abundance. Some only know how to give. They cannot receive help or rest. They dry up. Their land is arid. Others only know how to receive. They do not contribute or initiate. They stagnate. Their water rots. Generative balance is breathing. You exhale, give, act, and inhale, receive, rest. In economic crises, fear makes people stop giving and receiving. The flow stops and the crisis worsens. To reactivate generation, reactivate the cycle. Give something, even if little, with the masculine intention to initiate the flow, and open yourself to receive, with feminine gratitude, allowing the circuit to close. 3. Sexual energy and its transmutation. We cannot speak of generation without touching the mystery of sexual energy. This is the most potent force at the human being's disposal. In the physical plane, it creates bodies. In the mental plane, it creates ideas and realities. Modern chaos is characterized by the degradation of this energy. Pornography and sexual obsession are massive leaks of creative power. A person who wastes their generative force in compulsive gratification becomes metaphysically impotent. They have no internal pressure to create their life. Great creators and artists knew this and practiced sexual transmutation. When the alchemist feels intense desire, instead of dissipating it physically, he takes that high vibration and channels it toward his brain and his project. Sublimated sexual energy becomes charisma, courage, and tireless persistence. If you want to get out of chaos, stop throwing away your fuel. Thus, paternity of one's own life. You are an orphan only if you so decide. The principle of generation tells you that you have everything necessary to be born again. If your current life is a disaster, consider it a failed creation of your past ignorance. Do not repudiate it, but do not bind yourself to it. Begin today to engender the new being. Be the father of your future. Define clearly what you want. Be firm. Put the seed. Be the mother of your future. Love your project. Have patience with its growth. Feed it with faith. Give it warmth. Many fail because they are abusive parents to their own projects, insulting them with doubt. Treat your aspirations with the tenderness you would show a newborn, and defend them with the ferocity with which a lioness defends her cubs. Gestation time. Impatience is the negation of the feminine principle. Generation requires time. Pregnancy lasts 9 months. You cannot accelerate it by putting 9 women to gestate for 1 month each. In the era of immediacy, we want results yesterday. Not seeing them, we declare failure and abandon. Everything has its gestation period. When you change your mind, there is a dark period where it seems nothing happens. The seed is underground. It is breaking to germinate. This is the most critical moment. If you dig up the earth to see if it grows, you kill it. If you lose faith and stop watering, you kill it. The sovereign respects the dark time. He knows invisible activity is frenetic. He maintains calm and waits. Current chaos pushes you to hurry. Metaphysics invites you to the biological rhythm. Do not confuse the stillness of gestation with the inaction of laziness. Chaos, the creation of order in chaos. Finally, let us apply this to the chaotic environment. Chaos is, by definition, substance without form. It is pure potential waiting for an order. Chaos is not your enemy, it is your quarry. The leader, the magician, the creator, looks at chaos and does not see problems. He sees building materials. Where others see crisis, he sees opportunity to impose a new structure, positive masculine. Where others see tyranny, he sees the need to introduce fluidity, positive feminine. You balance the world by balancing yourself. Generation is the art of applying the missing force to create a new synthesis. Chapter 10, The Alchemy of Silence. Supreme power in a noisy world. We have reached the final threshold. We have traversed the architecture of the mind, the laws of correspondence, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and generation. We have dismantled the illusions of separation and the sensory veil. However, all these tools, powerful as they are, require a container to operate. They require a sacred space where energy does not dissipate, but accumulates until reaching the critical mass necessary for transmutation. That space is silence. I do not refer to the mere absence of acoustic noise, nor to the sterile void of inactivity. I refer to metaphysical silence, the contained potency. Silence is the dynamic stillness that precedes all creation and succeeds all destruction. It is the state of the bow drawn before releasing the arrow. It is the fertile void of which the ancient Taoists spoke, the non-doing that allows everything to be done. In a world sick with stridency, silence is the ultimate act of rebellion. It is the supreme demonstration of sovereignty. The society of chaos detests silence because it fears it. It fears what may emerge from it. That is why it fills every crack of existence with distraction, opinion, incessant music, and empty words. Noise is the collective anesthetic that prevents man from facing his own soul. The adept, however, seeks silence as the thirsty seek water. He knows that in the economy of the universe, he who speaks loses energy, and he who is silent accumulates it. The alchemy of silence is the art of sealing the hermetic vessel so that the inner fire does not go out, but cooks the raw material of experience. Experience is cooked until it becomes the philosopher's stone of wisdom. The hermetic seal. The word hermetic, which we use today to describe a perfect closure that lets nothing escape, comes from Hermes Trismegistus, the father of this philosophy. It is not a coincidence. The central teaching of the tradition is that power, to be effective, must be contained. Imagine a steam boiler. If the boiler has leaks, holes through which pressure escapes, the steam dissipates into the air without performing any work. It does not move pistons. It does not generate electricity. It does not drive the locomotive. It only makes noise and mist. But if you seal the boiler hermetically, the pressure increases. The energy is concentrated. And when that energy is released in a directed way, it has the strength to move mountains. Modern man is a boiler full of holes. His mouth is a constant leak of vital energy. He speaks of his plans before realizing them, dissipating the tension necessary to execute them. He speaks of his problems, giving them reality and substance. He speaks for the sake of speaking, out of fear of social emptiness, vomiting his interiority without any filter. His mind is another leak. It allows any external stimulus to enter and agitate its waters, reacting mechanically to every provocation. The alchemy of silence consists of plugging the leaks. It is the deliberate practice of containment, when you feel the impulse to speak, to justify yourself, to give an opinion or to complain, and you repress that impulse not out of fear but out of will. You are performing a magical operation. You are taking that energy that was going to be wasted in the wind and returning it to your own center. That saved energy does not disappear. It transforms into personal magnetism, mental clarity, and willpower. The silent man enters a room, and his presence is felt more than that of the noisy man. His aura is dense, compact, and charged. He carries with him the pressure of the sealed boiler. TREATISE, the incubator of realities. Returning to the principle of generation, we remember that every seed needs darkness and stillness to germinate. If you dig up the seed every day to see if it grows, you kill it. If you expose the fetus to light before its time, it aborts. Silence is the dark earth where the soul's projects are gestated. We live in a culture of transparency and visibility. We are told that we must share everything, publish everything, make noise to exist. Metaphysically, this is suicidal for creation. When you conceive an idea, a desire, or a plan for personal transformation, that plan is, at first, a fragile energetic structure. If you expose it prematurely to the opinions, doubts, and envies of the world, the structure crumbles. The dense vibrations of others, or even your own verbalized doubts, act like hail on a tender sprout. The master knows how to keep the secret, not out of paranoid distrust, but out of biological and spiritual protection. He keeps his plans under the mantle of silence until they have gained enough strength to defend themselves. There is immense power in knowing something that no one else knows. There is a gravitational force in working on a work that no one sees. That temporary invisibility allows the work to grow pure. It grows without being deformed by others' expectations. Silence creates an inviolable womb where you can be who you truly are, not who the world expects you to be. Third, the voice of intuition. The universe is constantly transmitting. The mind of the all sends signals of direction, warning, and inspiration to all its parts. That transmission is called intuition. But intuition transmits on a subtle frequency. It is a whisper, not a shout. The noise of the world and your own ego act as massive static. You ask for answers. You shout to heaven, "What should I do? Why is this happening to me?" And heaven responds, but you cannot hear it because you are too busy shouting or listening to the shouts of others. The alchemy of silence cleans the static. When you impose silence on your own thoughts, When you stop obsessively analyzing and simply are, the signal begins to arrive with crystal clarity. You do not need to seek truth in books, gurus, or endless conferences. The truth is already within you, encoded in your own spiritual structure. You only need to lower the volume of the world so that the truth can raise its own volume. Great discoveries, masterpieces of art, and brilliant military strategies were never born in the midst of tumult. They were born in moments of solitude and silence, when the individual mind tuned into the universal mind. If you want to be a genius in your own life, you must create the conditions for that harmony. The authority of presence. Observe the power dynamics in any human group. The fool speaks fast, interrupts, raises his tone, fills the air with hurried words. He fears that if he stops speaking, he will stop being noticed. His power is borrowed. It depends on others' attention. The king, the natural leader, the wise man, speaks little. He listens. He maintains long pauses that make the insecure uncomfortable. When he speaks, his words fall like heavy stones into a still pond, creating ripples that reach all shores. Silence is the language of authority. Whoever is sure of his position does not need to defend it with shouts. The truth is self-evident. Lies need complex arguments. In the midst of social chaos where everyone competes to be right, you can exercise devastating power simply by not entering the game. When someone provokes you, respond with silence and a serene gaze. That silence is a mirror where the aggressor sees himself reflected in his own stupidity. It forces him to hear the echo of his own insults, and that is usually enough to disarm him. Silence is not passivity. It is an action of high intensity. It is saying, your chaos does not have permission. Your chaos does not have permission to enter my order. Fasting of the word. The word is sacred. In ancient traditions, the logos is the creative principle. Let there be light, and light was made. We, made in the image and likeness of the Creator, also possess the power of the logos, though to a lesser degree. Our words create atmospheres, weave relationships, bless or curse futures. However, we have devalued our currency. We have inflated the word. We speak so much and say so little that our words have lost their market value. We promise and do not fulfill. We say things we do not feel. We use superlative words to describe trivialities. To regain your creative power, you must fast. You must undergo the fasting of the word. You must become stingy with your language. Do not say anything that is not true, useful, or kind. If what you are going to say does not improve the silence, keep quiet. This discipline is painful at first. You will realize how much of your daily conversation is mechanical, neurotic, and empty. You will realize that you use the word to cover your discomfort, to manipulate, or to beg for approval. By cutting that flow, you will feel the internal pressure increase. You will feel the ego's anxiety wanting to express. Hold that pressure, transmute it. When you speak again after a period of conscious silence, you will notice that your word has regained weight. People will listen to you with a new attention, because they will know that you do not speak for the sake of speaking. They will know that if you open your mouth, it is because you are going to say something that has substance. Your yes will be an iron contract. Your no will be an impassable wall. Value the center of the cyclone. We return to the image of the hurricane. The periphery moves at hundreds of miles per hour. It destroys houses, uproots trees. It is pure noise and violence. The center, the eye, is in absolute calm. You cannot stop the world's hurricane. The economy will follow its cycles, politics its dramas. But you can decide where to live, in the periphery or in the eye. The alchemy of silence is the centripetal movement that takes you from the periphery to the center. Every moment of conscious silence is a step inward. Every time you turn off a screen, it is a step inward. Every time you renounce having the last word, it is a step inward. In the eye of the hurricane, you are not disconnected from reality. On the contrary, you are at the only point from which the totality of the storm can be seen without being destroyed by it. From silence, action is more effective. The samurai attacks from a state of mental emptiness, mushin. He does not think, I am going to strike. The strike happens through him. The surgeon operates in silence. The architect designs in silence. Maximum efficiency requires minimum mental friction, and noise is friction. Sevita, practical discipline. How is this lived in the modern city, full of demands? You do not need to retreat to a monastery in the mountains. The monastery must be built within you, brick by brick. The sacred hour. Establish a daily period of absolute silence. No phones, no books, no music. Just you and your existence. At first your mind will rebel. It will remind you of urgencies, throw painful memories at you, bore you. Persevere. It is detoxification. After the mental storm, calm will arrive. That calm is the food of the soul. Selective inaccessibility. You are not obligated to be available 24/7. The world has made you believe so, to use you as a resource. Reclaim your right not to respond immediately. Turn off notifications. Own your response time. Make yourself hard to reach for the trivial, to be fully present for the essential. Deep listening. When you interact, practice active silence. Do not listen thinking about what you're going to answer. Listen to understand. Listen to the sound, the tone, the emotion behind the word. Empty yourself of self to receive the other. This is an act of love and power. He who listens controls the conversation. He who speaks gives himself away. Wait. Fear of the void. Why is silence so difficult? Why do people panic if the power goes out or the internet goes down? Because silence is an implacable mirror. In noise, we can pretend. We can distract ourselves from our own shadow, our failures, our mortality, our lack of purpose. Noise is the carpet under which we sweep our existential trash. When noise ceases, the carpet is lifted. We face ourselves, and what we see we often do not like. We see our loneliness, our smallness, our errors. This is the guardian of the threshold, the monster that guards the sanctuary entrance. Most flee in terror and turn on the television. The alchemist stays. He looks the monster in the eye. He accepts his own shadow. He accepts his pain, his guilt, and his fear. He does not cover them with noise. He dissolves them with the light of silent consciousness. This is also me, he says. By accepting it, the monster vanishes and clears the path toward the treasure. Only he who has crossed the desert of his own void can reach the oasis of his fullness. Connection with the all. Ultimately, silence is the language of God. The all does not speak in human languages. It speaks in pure vibration, in presence, in being. When you reach deep silence, when the mind stops labeling and judging, you touch the edge of the infinite. You realize not intellectually but experientially that you are not a body that has a mind, but that you are the consciousness that sustains both body and mind. In that silence, separation dissolves. You feel the life of the tree, the life of the stone, the life of the other. You understand the law. In that silence, the fear of death disappears, because what is eternal makes no noise and cannot be destroyed. In that silence, you recharge your battery directly from the source. The world's chaos is, in the end, a dance of forms that appear and disappear. Silence is the immutable stage where the dance occurs. You are the stage, not the dancer. Conclusion. The implicit order. We have traversed the invisible corridors that sustain the structure of reality. We have observed the gears of the mind, the tides of rhythm, and the scales of cause and effect. The words of this treatise now come to an end, but the true work has only just begun. Intellectual knowledge of the law is not power. It is only potency. Power resides solely in application. Upon closing this book, the external world will not have changed. The news will continue to narrate crises, the markets will continue to oscillate, and the crowd will continue to seek someone to blame. The difference lies in the fact that from today you no longer have the right to call yourself a victim. You are no longer a victim of that scenario. You have understood that chaos is not a malevolent force attacking you, but an implicit order that has not yet been understood or directed. Chaos is the clay. You are the potter. Confusion is the natural state of matter before being penetrated by the spirit. Your task is not to fear disorder, but to impose upon it the form of your own sovereign will. Do not wait for the storm to subside to build your refuge. Do not wait for society to become enlightened to light your own lamp. That waiting is the mark of the slave. The sovereign acts in the middle of the night, knowing his inner light is enough. Knowing that his inner light is enough to see the next step. The promise of metaphysics is not a life without difficulties, but a life without despair. Challenges will come because they are necessary for the tempering of the soul, but they will no longer find you unarmed. You will have the shield of neutrality for the downward rhythm. You will have the sword of transmutation for negative polarity, and the fortress of silence for the noise of the world. You are the anchor point. In a world that is falling apart, the greatest contribution you can make is not to add your cry to the chorus of complaint, but to establish a perimeter of order, calm and purpose. Establish this order around your own life. That order, by the law of correspondence, will extend to your family, your work, and your community, not through proselytizing, but through resonance. Remember, nothing is separate. Your private victory over fear is a victory for the whole of humanity. Your ability to remain centered when everything is spinning is the axis upon which a new world can turn. The treatise has concluded. The law has been exposed. The responsibility is now non-transferable. Do not look back. Do not ask, what will happen? Decide what shall be. The order is implicit within you. Unfold it.